Hello and welcome to episode 337 of the Stacey West podcast. My name is Gary and the reception may be particularly bad because I am just realizing now as we've gone live on YouTube that I haven't switched over to our other internet. I am joined by somebody who is not likely to be slow and dropping in and out. Mr. Lamming, how are you this evening, my friend?
Hello. I'm very well indeed, thank you. Long time no see, isn't it?
Yeah. It just yes, it is. So for those who don't follow me on social media of any description, Chris and I yesterday decided to spend the day. Well, we were going to spend the day productively because obviously we were away at Crawley, and it was just something that there was a little bit beyond the reach with Rotherham away coming up and Christmas, all that sort of stuff. So first game that we haven't actually been able to watch at all. So we thought, I'll listen to it on the radio. We were going to get into my bar. We were going to do some weights because Chris is a personal trainer as well, and he was going to show me my technique. And then we were going to do some work on ACAST, weren't we? We were going to do some productive stuff. What actually happened was we started drinking at half time and played 60 games of pool over a 10-hour period.
Yeah, I can't believe how many games of pool we played. It's absolutely
9 hours.
Ridiculous how that happens. It's like a whole day's work playing bloody pool. It's great fun though. It was great fun, and I did win in the end. But at one point, it was 25 each.
Now I am going to defend myself for those last 10 games, and I think that there is right. Now I'm not a peer pressure man. So when it comes to drinking, if I'm out with somebody and they're not drinking as well, I'm never going to be one that's like, oh, keep up. But at the end of the night, you revealed that you had how many beers during that time?
The equivalent of about 4 pints.
About 4 pints, with some tequila rosé as well. So to be fair, it's not you weren't sober. I had a count up today, and I counted 13 cans and bottles of Estrella, as well as I know I had a couple of tequila rosé shots more as well. So the 25-25 is really a fair reflection of the night. I think that the final few games, it got to a point where, at one point, I'm not sure I was even, every single time I went to the table to take a shot, I had to ask you what colour I was.
Yes, yeah, that did happen towards the last sort of 4 or 5 games. I enjoyed it. Obviously, it was nice because it was touch and go for the whole, like for literally 6 or 7 hours. In the last hour or so, it was I kind of felt like I pulled away a little bit, but it was good fun. Because of that though, we didn't actually end up doing any exercise, and we didn't do any work on podcasting, editing, etc. that I was meant to do. We did it this morning, in fairness, so we did kind of get caught up. But a good day was had. Helped very much, of course, by, in the end, what sounded like an incredibly positive performance, but it didn't start like that, did it?
No, it didn't. It's quite difficult for us because to do the wonders of modern technology mean that we never do a podcast without having seen the game. That's how it is. And the games that are not televised, usually if there's ones that we're not able to watch, we're at, such as Chesham or League Cup games and stuff like that. So this is the first time we've sat down to do a podcast where the highlights have been minimal. There aren't the full 90 minutes on Y-Scout because they don't cover the FA Cup. It's like going back to kind of 2018 when you didn't used to be able to see all the games at all. And it was only really the 2020-21 season where we were able to watch every minute. And since then, it's been every minute I think I've probably seen of Lincoln, apart from the odd game where we haven't been able to go, like Dave's wedding or stuff like that. So it's really strange listening to it on the radio. It's a different experience entirely, and you can feel quite separated from the action, I think. And nothing separates you from action more than 2 goals in the first 13 minutes. I mean, we've had an opportunity to watch the highlights now. I'm not going to try and put too much negativity on this because it's a big win. It's away from home. Cup ties are a one-off. We know that. We know that this game would never have happened in the league as it happened yesterday. It just wouldn't have happened that way. But it was just let's look at the first goal. I mean, it's schoolboy defending, isn't it, to let their boy in and stroke the ball home?
Yeah, it seemed a bit easy, didn't it? Crawley had quite a lot of possession in and around our 18-yard box. They had a lot of touches in and around that area as well. And that's the sort of thing that normally we kind of smother. And we don't normally allow too many touches in our box or around it. But we did in the first few moments there. Of course, like you mentioned, we can't really compare this to the rest of the action around the goals because we haven't seen them. Normally, I like to watch the full 90 minutes back if I can. Just double check the website now. It literally went on 20 minutes ago. So obviously, in terms of preparation for this, we couldn't watch the full 90 minutes. So we've literally got the highlights to go off and very, very minimal statistics. And what Michael Horton and Mark Holmes said on Radio Lincolnshire. That's literally all we have to go off here, which appreciate. It might not be ideal for anyone listening here because it's going to be very difficult to kind of get some real insight. But of what we did see, yeah, that was pretty crap, to be honest.
I don't think it's difficult to get insight because I think sometimes not having seen the action, you get a kind of a different feeling. When I say not having seen the action, we've seen the goals, we've seen the chances, we've seen kind of enough to talk about the game. But there's also, you're tending to think a little bit more about the state of the game. So when you're at a game watching during 90 minutes and you go 2-0 down, and then like Ethan Hamilton yesterday hit the outside of the post, and you're watching things unfold. Whereas when you're listening, you think, well, it's 2-0 right now. We've got a chance. What does that mean? Are we getting back into it? Are we edging into this? Are we edging into that? So I think it's almost, dare I say, and Charlie will kind of identify with this. If you take away one sense, it can kind of heighten your perception of certain other things, or it can lead you to think in a different way. And that actually goes into a conversation we had last night about linguistics, if you remember, of all things, where they actually say that if you learn a different language, it can change your thought patterns because the way that you communicate kind of develops with how you communicate and all that sort of stuff. So getting quite deep, but I do think that as a one-off, it wasn't particularly painful because we're there at 2-0. We haven't seen how bad the goals were. We have now, and they weren't great. I mean, Pordy was muscled off the ball for the second as well. But then we're thinking more about game state, aren't we? We're thinking more about, right, well, now we need the next goal. We're not watching to see if the next goal's coming. Does that make sense? Do you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah, it does. No, it does completely. Yeah, you kind of, when you're there, which I obviously would prefer to have been there and watched it live for just like every game. But when you can't, and normally you watch it, you get that kind of play-by-play experience of the game. So maybe you don't see the bigger picture of the individual match as clearly, whereas we can't see what's happening. So you're just kind of thinking, right, okay, well, that's 2-0 now. We've got 3/4 of the game left to go yet. Or what more than that, kind of sort of 5/6 of the game to go at that point. Plenty of time to get back into it. Next goal is really big. Can we get something in the next few minutes? And then obviously you're listening, but you can't always build a really particularly clear picture in your head of exactly what's going on the pitch from commentary. And to be honest, the pictures that you do kind of paint in your mind could be nothing like what's actually happening on the pitch because we all paint different pictures in our mind, don't we? But to hear that Pordy O'Connor got a goal back within 5 or 6 minutes of going 2 goals down, everything just felt okay again. Even though we were still a goal down, it just felt like the momentum had swung a little bit. And again, you're only experiencing this kind of almost third hand in a way, aren't you? But certainly from your bar, that's how it felt.
It was absolutely vital to get that goal at that time, I think, because you 2-0 down. The longer the game goes on, it can be a bigger effort. The crowd get behind the team perhaps a little bit more. You get Crawley would build that resolution, and they are a relatively tough team, not particularly a tough team to beat. But if you've got 2-0 lead and you're at home, I think that the away team have got to have something. And it sounded like things weren't going particularly well. But when you paint a mental picture in your head of Pordy's goal, it's exactly as it said on the tin. And the thing is, Joe, I think the telling thing, it's the captain. You lead by example. You get that goal back, and at 2-1, momentum is massive in football. We've talked about it all the time. In my write-up today, I spoke about early goals sometimes being a curse. It's not a curse if you don't concede, but I think about Blackpool, I think about Birmingham, two that really jump out at me. You get that early goal, and then it's like, I've got 89 minutes to get through now, and it can actually affect a game plan. Now, I don't know what Crawley's game plan was, but it certainly wasn't to be 2-0 up on 13 minutes. So when we pull one back, it's almost like, well, I think it puts them in this position where what we're going to do now, kind of thing. Do we revert to what the original game plan? How do we do it? And our game plan was simple. I mean, Tom Shaw says we've had a striker's school. It was to create chances and score goals. Now, one person who we know has been absolutely hammered over the last week, let's say, Jovan Makama, and it was the goal I think that we celebrated loudest.
It was.
Watching it back. It was, wasn't it? Watching it back, Fred's involved because, by the way, Fred didn't score yesterday. Lots of criticism aimed at our strikers. But I noticed Fred involved in at least 2 of the goals in the early stages of linking up. I don't care if our goals come from across 18 different players and they all get 2 or 3, as long as we're scoring goals and taking chances. But yeah, Jovan's goal was that it was an odd-looking header. It was like he'd been fired up into it, and it was like he hit it with the top of his head, but it was just brilliant seeing him get on the score sheet.
Yeah, it was in terms of the actual goal itself, it was a good goal, a decent header. Obviously, keeper came out and he clearly spotted that, because you don't choose to loop your header like that unless you know that it's going to go over a goalkeeper. So I think it's a well-controlled header. But taking the specifics of the goal out of it, it's just the fact that Jovan Makama scored a goal, and I think that's massive for him. His confidence gets a little bit, hopefully gets some of the pressure off his shoulders a little bit, and maybe just silences a little bit of the criticism. There's no denying that overall finishing is something that Jovan will endeavour to improve, but he's got so many attributes which are really kind of beneficial to the team. And as you mentioned, who cares? Realistically, who cares who scores a goal, providing that everyone that's on the pitch is being involved and playing a vital part in the team being successful and scoring goals as a collective. So you mentioned Fred there. Like you say, he didn't score, but he was definitely involved with 2 of the goals, particularly one of the ones in the second half where he received the ball kind of back to goal, linked up, really good first touch to keep the move kind of flowing, and then eventually it ended up, I think it might be Jack Mullen's goal. But it was just it was good. I was just so pleased for Jovan more than anything, and it's weird, like you can't see it, but I just felt we was going to win at that point. You know what? I felt like we was going to win at 2-1. As weird as that sounds, I think we both said it, didn't we? Even though we had no real reference point to give us any evidence to suggest that was a valid mentality to have, other than we know what this squad can do when it clicks, and when we some other teams, and when we press. And almost when you're 2-0 down, you have no choice. You have to do that. So you kind of have, there are less risks, aren't there? You have to go for it. And it sounds like, and it looks like, we absolutely went for it. So that meant, of course, we went in at half-time 2-2. It could have actually been 3-2 up.
Yep. There was a couple of things I want to pick up on there and unpack, if that's okay. First of all, we weren't the only ones that felt that even at 2-0 down, we were going to win it. Sue Imp has put in the comments, even at 2-0 down, I felt we were going to win it. Not my rose-coloured glasses, but the lads looked at it. Carl Mercer, lots of people know Carl, a friend of mine, messaged me this morning and said at 2-0 down, he turned to his mate and said, we're going to win this. And it was just a feeling. It was almost just like, it was like we hulked up. Anybody who's Hulk Hogan fan will remember when Hulk used to get beaten down, and then he got to a point where he'd just be shaking it off, and it's like, Crawley score, not having that, Crawley score again, and he's like that, doing all the flexing and stuff. And like you say, should really have been 3-2. I mean, I thought their keeper was partly to blame for Jovan's goal. I thought he rushed out kind of a little bit quickly, and there was but he's absolutely then, when I say kept him in it, with a double save. Now the commentary, and this is interesting, because this is where you kind of get a second, second opinion. You get a different view, because the commentary made it sound like Deriqua should really have scored his header, and it was a glaring miss. And then when you actually watch it back, they were both decent headers, and they're just both good saves, aren't they?
Yeah, they are both good saves. I agree with you in the first one. I wouldn't like to say it's his fault, the Jovan's goal, but he certainly helped Jovan make his mind up in terms of how to place his header. So he had a role to play. But yeah, just 2 really good saves. I think both players will have been disappointed not to score. I wouldn't say I'd expect them to. I think you have to credit the keeper sometimes. It's just 2 really good saves. But we were absolutely in the ascendancy. To be honest, we was in the ascendancy since 2-0 down, but obviously getting 2 goals back in quick succession, a really good couple of opportunities to score just before half-time. You go in at half-time, buzzing, even though it's effectively 0-0, isn't it? In terms of there's parity, but in terms of the emotion of the game, momentum does exist in football. We've all seen it with our eyes, and all you just hope is that you carry on and start the second half how we finished the first.
Which, well, you say that we didn't finish the first with 2 goals. That I've watched them both back several times, and I'm not sure which is the better goal, because they both have such unbelievable quality. Now, Eric Ring, again, I don't want to be telling people what, but it sounded like, and from the highlights, it was a coming of age game for Eric Ring. I know he scored the goal a couple of weeks ago. Was it Northampton? He got the winner against, if I remember correctly. But he was involved in almost all of the chances, and his goal, as shades of Bruno Andrade, shades of Matt Reed, is when you hit that, and I put that there is a technical term for it, when you hit the ball with such power that it travels in an absolute straight line, without deviating, without dropping, without losing pace into the back of the net, and it is officially known as a shit pinger, and that's exactly what it was, because you were thinking there was a proper scientific name.
Yeah, I thought you were going to a scientific word there. Shit pinger. Because the word that came to my mind was thunder bastard, to be honest.
And you know what? The thing is, it's a long throw. And on a serious note, people have been critical of the long throws, saying, we always put them in there and nothing ever happens. Long throw, flicked on. Eric's picked up the seconds, and there's one that we'll be watching back and will be referenced as the Andrade goal was for an awful long while yet.
Yeah, great finish. Just, it's one of those when speaking from experience of scoring goals like that myself, never, of course, but the experience of catching a ball that nicely, not only when taking like a drop kick when you're playing a goal, but it's the same sort of technique, that kind of sidewinder technique. And the best ones, it feels like you haven't even touched the ball. Like, it feels like the connection is so pure, and it was exactly like that. It just flew off his foot. And it's just bang. But also it's the fact that it was a couple of minutes after half time. It wasn't just it happened at some point in the second half. It was boom. We came out the blocks incredibly quickly. Second half, just started the second half as we finished the first. It sounded like, and then a brilliant goal, and then pretty much immediately off the kickoff, near enough. Like, was it 1 minute later? I think 1 or 2 minutes later. An equally good goal in a very, very different manner. To make it 4-2, and what we felt at the time was game over. Obviously, it didn't turn out to be quite that simple, but it was a really good team move. As we mentioned, Freddie a moment ago, linking play, ultimately keeping the move flowing. And you're not going to notice Freddie in that, most people, because it's just ball goes into him, lays it off, and then it goes out to Eric Ring, and then it goes into to Jack Mullen. So that's Eric Ring with a goal and assist in the space of like 2 minutes. Jack Mullen with the cheekiest of finishes, by the way. This isn't just a wax lyrical about our centre forwards who have actually done something good for once in terms of the narrative. But I think it's just worth just pointing out that Fred did have a really vital role to play in that. And there's a lot of people, the ball comes in like that and it just bounces off them, even at this level. So that was credit to Fred. But yeah, really, really positive, direct run from Eric Ring. And then, the cheekiest of cheeky finishes from Jack Moylan.
Well, it was just a delicious team goal. Starting in the kind of middle of the pitch, and as you say, it was Fred, and I think it was then to Jack Moylan, to McCarmer to Ring in, Moylan finished it. It was just nice to hear these names mentioned, because there was criticism, and rightly so, that there should have been after the Wrexham game. We wasted chances in front of goal. We could have taken points, but to see some of the players who, I'm not going to say didn't turn up against Wrexham, but certainly McCarmer and Draper took stick against Wrexham. McCarmer, as it was pointed out, won the free kick that led to Pordy's goal. He scored a goal. He's then been involved in the fourth goal. You've got Fred involved in 2 of the goals. He's also drawn a great save from the keeper. You've got Eric Ring, who someone said, well, is he settling? Is he doing enough? And Jack Moylan, he was man of the match for many on Tuesday, but then there was question marks over, well, does he make the right decisions all the time? So to see those 4 involved in a move that, and in the end, like you say, was a cheeky finish. And at that point, you think, well, is it now going to be 6-2 like Forest Green? Is it going to be? But that's then presents another challenge, doesn't it? And that's what we said. I think you said it yesterday at some point. We got more out of this game winning 4-3 than we would have 3-0, because if we go and win 3-0 and you just take them apart and you just score goals, brilliant. But what we saw yesterday was having to bounce back from extreme adversity, hit in top gear, but doing it so early that then there was inevitably going to be a bit of pressure from Crawley. There was inevitably going to be kind of some nerves, and then they score their own. Well, I mean, it was all right, wasn't it? I mean, I think he stuffed it from 25 yards or whatever. It was a brilliant finish. But then we've got his backs against the wall as well. So it was, I hate the saying typical cup tie, but I'm going to use it. It was just a cup tie. It was just every time we went forward, it sounded like, it looked like, and as it transpires, it felt like we were going to score. But every time we were defending, on the evidence of the first 2 goals, squeaky bum time as well.
Yeah, very much so. At 4-2, I did feel it could quite easily have gone on and being 5-6 at that point, and it'd been really comfortable, and that'd been really nice. But it's like you say, it's the FA Cup, and I hate to say the magic of the cup, because I think it has lost a little bit of that in the later rounds. I'd argue even this early on, sometimes you don't tend to see it, particularly when you've got 2 teams in the same league playing each other. Like, it's just a bit of a nothing tie. We were all disappointed by this tie after the Chesham game, weren't we? But it turned into a really entertaining game, a game that for those incredibly dedicated supporters that were able to make it down there, 400 plus imps that were able to go to the game, like, they were the only people that actually were able to watch the full 90 minutes of that and absorb it all. And I kind of like that. I kind of like that from an FA Cup perspective. It does make it special. It made it frustrating for us from like an analytical perspective to be able to actually talk about this in depth. But yeah, it certainly adds something to it as much as takes away. But yeah, once you kind of got 10 minutes from the end, you think, it's not that we're hanging on, but it's just thought there was going to be a twist somewhere, because it just felt, I don't know why, it just felt like that was kind of the script. And they obviously got one back. It was a really, really good finish. And but then we of course we hung on, shall we say. It didn't sound like it was kind of backs against the wall as such, because ultimately Crawley still only had 6 shots in the whole game. Of course, 3 of those went in. So there weren't many shots or attempts on goal in the final kind of dying moments. It seems like we kind of saw it out relatively comfortably. But of course, when the scoreline is so close in the last few moments, then it always makes it a little bit nervy. But yeah, final whistle went. Delight in the staying in bar. Delight, I imagine, in the away end at the Broadfield Stadium, and around everyone who was listening online. Can I just mention something in terms of stats? Because of course, everyone that doesn't like this very much will love to know is that there were very, very minimal statistics available for FA Cup games at this level. Yeah, damn. But one thing that stands out from a purely Lincoln City perspective, we had 23 shots, which is more than we've had for ages, and 14 of those were on target. Their keeper was forced to make 10 saves. That's just massive. So that's not poor finishing. Poor finishing is missing the target. You know, you think of Jobin's miss against was it Exeter Bristol Rovers, whichever one it was. Everyone says, "Oh, that's a big chance," and you kind of defended it at the time. So it's only like 0.2 or something in terms of XG, but the minimum at that point, you got to hit the target. You know, work the keeper, make him make a save, and then you never know what happens after that. But we did. We hit the target. We made the keeper work. We made the keeper work incredibly hard. He had to make 10 saves. Obviously, the other 4 went in of those shots on target. So that's good. That's good. And you know, it almost felt after 15 minutes, here we go again. Lesson in taking your chances, because at that point, Crawley, I think, had a couple of shots and scored 2 goals, and bloody typical. But from that moment on, we showed great character, it appears, but also we really improved at all the things that we had been kind of weak at and over the last few weeks. So it gives us a real boost going into Tuesday.
Now, I've got a question for you, and it's one that we haven't prepped for particularly, so it's not going to be easy for you to answer. So I did go back on Y-Scout, looking for the last time we were involved in a game where one of the teams in that game had more than 14 shots on target. Okay. And I'll give you a couple of clues, because it won't be a great segment for people listening at home. It was the 2017-18 season, and it was a league game. And we faced 15 shots on target.
In the league?
in the league, and I'll ruin it in a second. I'll give you a couple more seconds, and then I will.
Yeah, it's just dead air. No,
Yeah.
I've no idea. You're gonna have to put me out of my misery here.
It was the Jody Jones game.
Oh,
Coventry. Yeah. It was
Did Tom
15.
Bayliss play and/or score in that game as well?
Don't know. He scored in the second one, didn't he? The one that we
That might be what I
won
was thinking of.
4-2. But this was the one that we lost 2-1. I think it was actually it was around the same time of year. It was 18th or 19th because it was around my birthday. And they were outstanding. So even Liverpool, when they scored 7 past us, didn't have that many. Even the 2 games against Cambridge, the 5-1 at their place and the 6-0 at our place last season, not that many. Yet it was still 4-3. And that's something that people will, I think, pick up on is, we did work the goalkeeper. That's brilliant. But it should have been 6 or 7-2, probably, in fairness. So, but it is what it is. One other thing I want to pick up on as well, which I think was 2 things I want to pick up on. First of all, Tyler Walker on the bench. Now, we kind of know that when I say it was a token gesture, that's wrong. How am I going to put it? It was more to do with reintegrating him into the squad rather than him likely to come on. I chatted to somebody at the club a little bit earlier on who kind of said, look, and Michael said it online as well, so it's no real insight, but it was unlikely he was going to get on. It's highly unlikely he'll be on the bench against Rotherham because we're back down to the normal number of substitutes, and he's still a little bit of way off, but it was just a way of integrating him into the squad, watching the game from dugout level rather than pitch level. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a positive thing?
Yeah, I loved it. I really liked it. It links a little bit to something I mentioned. I shared it in our group chat. So I'm sure there's plenty of people who listen to this that are also fans of the High Performance podcast. I really, really like that. And just this week, they had Graham Potter on, which, again, absolutely fascinating. And, you can kind of see this as a positive or a negative. Interestingly, Graham Potter did as well. There's a link to this, by the way. I promise you there's a reason I'm saying this. And he was asked after explaining loads of things that happened in his career, particularly talking about his Chelsea experiences. What's your biggest strength? What's your biggest weakness? And his answer to both questions was empathy. And I loved that for lots and lots of reasons. Some of it work related as much as what we do here, to be honest. But I just thought that was really just emotionally intelligent. And it just makes you remember that behind every footballer is a person. And we can all have an opinion on Tyler Walker in terms of his value to the squad on the pitch, but Tyler Walker is a human being, just like every player is a human being, and it must have been incredibly tough for him. And I just like the fact that the situation arose with the ability to name nine substitutes. He's clearly close enough to fitness to at least be an option. If he's still wearing a brace, for example, he's not going to be on the bench, is he? So I appreciate he's probably still a long way off actually featuring regularly for us, but I just thought it was the human element of it was just really nice. It's just another example of, I like to think the club just doing things the right way. We saw it with how Lewis Montsma was treated during his injuries, and that goes back seasons ago, doesn't it, as well, in regard to him being offered a new deal whilst injured, as well as what's happened this summer. Just another example of just me being quite proud of my football club. It's just nice. It's just doing the right thing by someone away from the pitch, even though it's around the football. It's kind of just that human element. I really liked it. I didn't expect to see him at all. And like you say, it's unlikely he'll be in and around the match day squad for a little while still. But the fact he's getting closer to that, and just to see his name on there was nice. But yeah, the reasoning behind it just kind of was quite heartwarming, to be honest. And I can only be positive about that. Now, some people will have maybe opposite opinions on that, but linking into Graham Potter's answer to his the question is that it can be a massive positive depending on how you look at it. Sometimes it can be seen as a negative, but for me it's predominantly positive.
I just noticed how desperately I need a haircut. Can you see it all standing up on that side? I must have slept on one side. I don't actually know. I can't remember coming in from the bar, to be fair, last night. I remember waking up with a mouth that's drier than a bloody flip-flop. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention, you have just pulled in, it's Lewis Montsma. Because it's basically just accepted that he is now a first-team player again. And that's brilliant, but it actually deserves some recognition. And it's happened kind of stealthily with Tom Hamer's injury, Jacko's injury. Lewis has had to come in. we haven't had a choice, and he's rose to the occasion. And when you think, oh my Lord, it was only 3 or 4 months ago that he came on. I mean, okay, July, so 4 months, July. He came on against Arsenal and scored that goal in the pre-season friendly, and everyone's going, oh, it's brilliant. God, what a story this is. 4 months later, the story's gone. It's gone. Lewis Monsman's just a Lincoln City first-team player. And when you think he was given the short-term contract to prove his fitness, and Michael Scabala said in a pre-season interview, he's here to fight for a first-team place. But it was almost like there was this undercurrent of, we're giving him a platform to get back into football. And I don't know who that's the bigger testament to, whether it's the club and the medical staff, because we've got Lewis back to this position, but a huge, huge amount of it has got to be to the player himself, to be as fearless as he is. Once again, he's had 3 ACL injuries, and it's odd because we just mentioned Jody Jones. He had the first of a couple of ACL injuries a week after that Coventry game, which is quite amusing. Not quite amusing, you know what I mean? Quite ironic almost that we're talking about that. And then obviously Lewis, I mean, he's had good games. He's not done anything amazingly outstanding. He's not popped up with a back stick header or something like that. But you've just watched games and gone, yeah, he's just one of our players. And that level of normality is actually huge news, and it gets overlooked, I think, a little bit. And I think we spoke about this briefly this morning, didn't we?
Yeah, again, we're back to normal now, Gary. We're just agreeing all the time. We had a couple of weeks, a little while ago, where we did disagree on something. But yeah, I think it's impossible for any Lincoln. It's impossible for any Lincoln City supporter to be negative about this situation, though, isn't it? And we all hoped it would happen. I don't know if many of us really genuinely believed it. Honestly, I didn't myself. I thought he would play trophy games, and it would be not a token gesture. That's incredibly harsh, but we're not kind of aware of the intricacies of what happens off the pitch, but we all wanted this to happen, but I honestly didn't think it would, but it has. And yeah, we can praise the club, we have, but you're absolutely right. The majority of the praise absolutely needs to go to Lewis himself. I cannot possibly imagine the hell he'll have been through as a professional footballer, not been able to kick a football for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, well, months and months and months, and to have 3 potentially career-ending injuries and come out the other side, and to be at this point now where no longer am I wincing every time he goes into a challenge. You just expect it. And the first few games of the season, like, oh no, God, please don't hurt it again. Don't, yeah, not him, anyone but him. But now you don't even think about it. You just, yeah, boom. I have to admit, I've been really impressed with that from Lewis this season, because if he came back into the team, as my mind was a few weeks and or months ago, I had no doubt that his technical ability would still be spot on and way above what you'd expect from a standard defender at this level. I thought we would see him look after the ball well, pick some clever passes. I didn't know how it would be on the physical side of the game. If he did get a heavy challenge, was he going to be as dominant aerially? Because he was quite dominant aerially before, but I think that was always maybe overlooked. And he's just been solid as a rock, particularly in the last kind of 5 or 6 games. Solid as a rock, particularly on the physical side of the game. And that's not to say that I expected weakness, but I thought that would be the element that you maybe would tell a difference in his performances, but not at all. Absolutely not at all. Was just solid as a rock, good on the ball, first team player. Delighted to have him back.
Yeah. And the 3 at the back suits him, by the way, much better than
perfectly.
We played a back 4 without a doubt. And one of the goals I seemed to think, was it Pawdy's goal? I saw him deliver a cross in that ended up, it was either a chance or a goal. So he's certainly involved. So yeah, brilliant. Now, Kate has posed a question that was going to end this part of the show. And by this part of the show, I mean, if you're listening at home, the advert will come on shortly. If you're watching live on YouTube, there won't be an advert. It'll just be me and Chris doing some mindless chatter for a little while. So the big question now is, do we hope for one of the big glamour ties or the lowest possible opposition for the best chance at progression, likely leading to a glamour game eventually? Now, there have been 1 or 2 answers in the comments, so before we answer, we'll pick up on those. Steve Race says, I would like Ipswich again. We seem to have success against them. I think they knocked us out in the first round in 2019-20. Alan Judge with the last-minute goal after a replay, I seem to think. I'm assuming, so Steve Barton would like Forest away, which would be a repeat of the first round tie from 2007 or 8, I think.
A while ago, yeah.
07, 08 or 08, 09, one of the two. Dean Wagstaff says Accrington or Morecambe away, guaranteed. Gaz Nicholson, Bromley at home. Be a nice chance for Sam Long to come back and get some minutes. I think, and John Booth would like Spurs away. Now, we discussed this morning, didn't we? And I said, I want the glamour tie now. Get it out of the way. If we're going to go deep in the competition, and people will shoot me for this, EFL trophy, because there's big prize money there. Let's get the glamour tie and all the big money now in the third round, and then you can put it to one side. You don't have that distraction as much for the league, and that's such a hipster answer, isn't it? Oh no, I'm far more interested in the league than the cup. We don't want to go to the quarterfinal of the cup. It'll spoil everything. We want to be winning in the league. It is though, isn't it?
The thing is, I think you're right. I think you're right. We've got genuine aspirations of a high finish in the league. Whether we get there or not is obviously yet to be decided. But that's obviously our aspiration. I love a cup run. I absolutely love the FA Cup. Ultimately, an FA Cup run made this football club what it is now, partly, didn't it? And we certainly wouldn't be where we are now, I doubt, without that FA Cup run. So I think we all know the benefits of it. But ultimately, in the FA Cup, you want a glamour tie. All of us of a League One and below want a glamour tie. So I think the answer to the question is, who do you want in the next round? It's Man United away. It's the worst big team. So you got a half a chance on the pitch, and it's likely going to be the highest attendance, because even in the kind of early rounds against lower teams, United tend to sell out or near sell out. So you're going to be 50, 60,000 people there minimum. You're going to get half of those gate receipts, or 45% of those gate receipts, and you get to have a brilliant day out at one of the biggest clubs in the world. And
you'd be on telly.
You'd absolutely be on telly, because they always show Man U, don't they? Even if Man United are playing Villa, for example, they'll still show that game, even though there's more interesting FA Cup ties. So that'd be mine. But if we can't get a glamour tie in this round, then you want to get the lowest, easiest possible draw to give you the best opportunity of a glamour tie in the next round. What you don't want is a boring game at home against a team in this league or League Two, and it's just a bit of a nothing game. As we mentioned in the Crawley game, that felt like a nothing game, turned into a really kind of a bit of a classic in terms of spectacle. But in terms of the draw, I want Man United away. I like the shot of Spurs, by the way, because I've not been to Spurs' stadium yet, and I'd like to experience that. But as a fan, I think there's always something a little bit special about Man United away, and we've never done it, have we? This Leicester City, so
we haven't. And I think about League Cup, played Spurs in, I want to say living memory, the last 40 years. So for some people, it's ancient history. But we've had Spurs, we've had Arsenal in the FA Cup, we've had Liverpool in the League Cup, we've had West Ham, we've played Man City, we've only played Chelsea kids. But Man United are that one team that I can't, even friendlies and under 21 sides, we've played them a little bit, but they're the team, they're the draw. No matter what happens in English football, Man United are the biggest club in this country. And I don't care if there's Liverpool fans or Arsenal fans want to pop in a chat and go, oh, you're wrong. They're the biggest club in this country, and they're one of the biggest clubs in the world. That's why Eric Ring said straight away, Man United away, Old Trafford, because it's Man United. They are an institution, and they are more of an institution than any other club in England. If we couldn't have that tie, of course you want the glamour tie, but then you want to be a Tamworth at home. But the danger there is, it's easy to say, well, you want the easiest tie. But when a club like Tamworth or Morecambe, who have gone through, or somebody like that, have got to this stage, it's not an easy tie. And that's why you end up seeing, was it Kettering the other year again against West Ham? Was it Kettering West Ham when Jared Bowen? Kidderminster, wasn't it? Kettering had West Ham, I think, the year they knocked us out, possibly, or Emily did. It galvanizes. So actually, to a degree, you think, well, maybe a Morecambe actually would be the better call, but then would it, because they knocked us out last year? So that's why you go for the big club and you go, we'll have the FA Cup third round, Man United, there's no replays, we'll get all the cash, and then we can concentrate, because we're not going to win the FA Cup.
Yeah, it's a no-lose situation in that draw, isn't it? Whatever happens, you win. You either win on the pitch or you win off it. So yeah, it's a win-win situation there against a big club. When you play against a so-called smaller side, then there are negatives there. If you lose, it's embarrassing, isn't it? And then that's
one other question. So let's say we're not going to get the big draw. If you had to pull a championship club away from home, which championship club would you want to play and why? And I have an answer to this, so I can answer first.
Yeah, you go first.
Leeds.
Oh, I was going to say Leeds as well. Okay, fair enough.
Because Leeds are, again, one of the biggest clubs in the Championship by a mile. And like, if we were to draw a Sunderland or a Derby, the big games, we played them in the league not so long back. But Leeds, Ellen Road, or Leeds coming to ours. I mean, can you imagine Town? There's more Leeds fans, I think, in Lincoln at times than there are Lincoln fans. There's so many of them. So I'd take Leeds home or away. And do you know what? This is an odd one. I'd take QPR.
That is an odd one. Please explain.
Yeah, I don't really have an explanation. I just quite fancy the idea of playing QPR. I don't know why. They're rubbish at the minute. I think there'd be a real opportunity to go and beat a QPR, because let's face it, that's what you actually want from your cup run. Is if you're going to have the cup run, you don't want to be playing a Tamworth in the next round. You want to be beating somebody who's beatable from the division above, who are not concentrating quite as much. The easier games are probably the Plymouth Argyles away than they would be the Morecambes or the Tamworths for certain reasons, because Plymouth will come up in the FA Cup going, we're desperate to stay in the Championship. So in the third round, they're focusing on the Championship, whereas Tamworth are focusing on kicking the arse of whoever they've got in the FA Cup third round. It's their cup final. So you actually want that lower end Championship club. And if we were to then beat QPR, that's a big result. So yeah, QPR. So we're saying Man United away, Leeds, QPR, or Tamworth.
You are, yeah. I'm not going to jump on the QPR bandwagon there. I couldn't care less about QPR in all honesty. But yeah, I want Man United away. I'll be honest. That's the one I want. But we can't choose what we get. We get what we get. But it's just nice to be able to have this conversation, isn't it? Ultimately, particularly after being 2-0 down after 15 minutes.
Have you ever been to Loftus Road?
Have I been to Loftus Road? I feel like I have, but I can't place why or when.
So then why would you want Spurs at their new stadium and not Loftus Road, a traditional English football stadium?
A bit different, isn't it? This was something meant to be quite special about Tottenham's new stadium. I'd just like to experience it.
I only want QPR because it sounds like the sort of thing that a hipster would want. Oh no,
that's the sort of thing. It's the sort of thing I should be saying then, eh?
Yeah, it is. I don't want Man United. I want to play Queen's Park Rangers, Millwall.
Can we have St. Pauli away?
If you're listening at home, you are about to get an advert. I'm going to find a pen and make a note of the time. And if you are watching here, then we'll have a little chat before we come back. Brilliant. 42 minutes, 31 seconds. Yeah,
good.
I don't really know why QPR.
I wasn't expecting that.
There are certain teams where there's a little bit of I've never really known us play them, or
it's just a novelty, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah,
I can't remember us ever playing. We must have, but I can't remember us playing.
Brentford. We played Brentford in the league once. I mean, we've played a lot of these teams in the league.
Brentford club for a long time, weren't they?
Yeah, we drew 2-2 with them one day. I think was it postponed or did it go ahead? And Anthony Elding scored for us, I think. Right, so what have we got coming up in part two? In part two, we're going to have a real quick chat about the FA Youth Cup, and then we are going to launch into Rotherham. Adam Bull says he can't remember us playing QPR. Sorry, were you going to
ask your ChatGPT, Adam?
You could just ask me, who's just looked. We lost 4-2 to them in 1972 in the League Cup. We've then played them in fact, Joe, we've only played them 6 times. Lost 4-2 in 1972. They beat us 5-0 at home in the league in 1962, but we beat them 3-1 at their place. And in 48-49, we played against them, drew 0-0 and lost 2-0. And our first meeting with them was in the FA Cup on the 14th of December, 1929, and we lost 2-1. And I'm told Andy Pearson refereed that game.
Oh.
In 1929. Right.
Oh, I see. I was sorry. I was letting you just chat away while I was checking my notes for this next little bit. Then I missed the punchline. I'm sorry.
Adam says 1948, 1949, but it's not, Adam. It was the League Cup in 1971-72. I do have a book handy with scorers, but that's not going to make great television. Shall we come back in? Are you ready to come back in what we're on? 44, 43, 2, 1. Hello and welcome back. Thank you to whoever has advertised with us this week, unless it's the Sun. If it's the Sun, we don't thank you, and I'm going to request that is removed. But we never have the Sun advertised to us because I actually specified that we didn't. So there we go. Anyway, so before we move on to Rotherham United, there was some news in the week where Lincoln City's under-18s beat Bolton Wanderers 3-2 with a last-minute goal from Denny Oliver and a brace from Dakara Weaver. We now have a date for the next round, and it's quite an occasion because we're playing Wrexham, which doesn't sound brilliant, Wrexham under 18s, but the Wrexham cameras are coming. The Welcome to Wrexham documentary are following the youth team for their FA Trophy, or FA Cup rather, FA Youth Cup journey, and it's at Sinsel Bank, and it's under the lights, and it's a week on Wednesday, so it's a big night for the youth team. We're away at Morecambe in the Mickey Mouse Trophy the night before, so it's not like there's another midweek Lincoln game that lots and lots of people will be going to. Could be interesting to see if there's a bit of a crowd for this, couldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be great to get a good gate for that game. It's great. It's just great to see the youth team doing so well. There's some really good goals in that Bolton game, by the way. It's always nice to win in that last minute, of course, but just the quality of some of those goals just in general were really, really good, really promising. But yeah, quite a big occasion, really, isn't it? It'd be, if I can, I'd love to get there myself, and hopefully you can get plenty of other people to come down as well. And yeah, ultimately show the club in a really positive light on apparently quite a big TV show in America.
No, watched it.
I actually have. It's weird. I like the production, and I kind of didn't dislike the journey until they're now in our league, and now I just really dislike them. I also the fact that I learned that a lot of the fund is through loans with interest that I didn't realise at the start. But you can't deny that the production quality is really good and how they put the things together are quite good. And it'd be nice that we're going to be featured, even if it is just in quote unquote just the youth team. I think it's only a positive, isn't it?
It'd be really nice if we beat them. Stick that
particularly that, yes.
Yeah, stick that in your documentary. That was what they were singing at Sunderland. Well, I did watch some of the Sunderland till I die. The first two seasons of that. Excuse me. I really enjoyed that. Just before we carry on, something that I missed in the first part, by the way, was a word on Rob Elliott, the Crawley manager. Excuse me. So really complimentary points after the game, saying that we're probably the best team his side have faced all season. And sorry, 1 second. Yeah, that's why you shouldn't run when you have a cold. Yeah, best side we've played all season. One of the best in the division at putting set pieces in. Now, it does appear, from what I've heard, that his demeanour didn't just extend to being complimentary in press conference. I've been told that he took the time to shake the hand of almost everybody connected with Lincoln City Football Club before they left, wished as well, right down to members of the media team. I really like to hear that. Respect to Rob Elliott. I haven't liked Crawley for 13 years because Steve Evans managed them and they replaced us in the Football League. I think I may just have changed my mind now.
I, to be honest, probably still don't particularly like Crawley. Just turns out I do quite like Rob Elliott as a bloke. But I'd still prefer not to, despite him being a nice guy. If they'd won yesterday, I don't think I'd have been quite so bothered about him being a nice bloke. But it's just it's nice to see that there are still some good people in football, particularly outside of our club as well. But yeah, fair play to him for that. And we'll go into the next round. But I suppose we ought to move on to Rotherham on Tuesday night.
The reason I do dislike Crawley, the reason I dislike Gillingham, the reason that I dislike high saturated fat diets, Steve Evans. Now, inevitably, whenever we play a Steve Evans side, Steve Evans becomes the narrative. I am very guilty of driving that narrative. So I'm going to get my Steve Evans stuff out first, if that's okay, before we then actually talk about Rotherham United. He's a joke. And this season, I have been thoroughly vindicated in saying that Rotherham were going to struggle and that he is good when he's putting together a team on a budget that's got to fight for every single thing they can fight for. And he is, there's no doubt in that. When you look at the job that he did at Stevenage, great job, can't deny it. Give him a little bit of money and he's an addict. He's a player buying addict. He's like the guy on Football Manager that will literally just sign players because they can. And it leads, I think, to team disharmony. And that's something that's been proven. He's been very belligerent in recent interviews. He snapped at a interviewer a couple of weeks ago who said, "Are you worried about relegation?" He said, "Don't be silly. We won't be getting relegated." He has called out Cameron Humphreys, one of his new signings, on more than one occasion for his quality of defending. So it's individual players are at fault. Last week, he was saying that he has the backing of the chairman for now and a long time to come, and he's got no fear whatsoever of the sack. Basically, he's a one-man bullshit machine. I didn't have anything particularly against Rotherham. Didn't have a massively bad word to say about him under Paul Warne. For me, he taints everything he touches. He is slowly but surely the last of a dying breed, and he's becoming less and less relevant. He's still got his other clown who's just been sanctioned by the FA yet again for touchline antics. There's no place for it. Actually, the way Rob Elliott is, the way Michael Skubala is, the way that 90% of managers are now, which is respectful. It doesn't write headlines. I get that. It doesn't create drama when you're being nice to people. But that's kind of how football's gone. A lot of people listening in will be disagreeing with me and going, "We want that anger. You want the pantomime villain." You kind of do, but I prefer it was an Ian Evatt figure than it was a Steve Evans figure.
Or a Danny Cowley figure.
Or a Danny Cowley figure, yeah. I mean, Danny was always kind of half like Steve Evans with his touchline antics, but he was always very respectful. So there are problems at Rotherham, and they run a little bit deeper than Steve Evans, I believe. I mean, Steve Race said the board left at 77 minutes in their last away game. So, but it isn't Steve Evans versus Lincoln City. It's Rotherham United versus Lincoln City. And Rotherham United are a League One team of 11 players. And Chris is going to tell you all about them.
Yeah. I agree with what you said about Steve Evans, by the way. I'm not gonna pretend I don't agree with any of it, because I do. I agree with almost all of it. However, I think there is a couple of things to point out on the pitch, because just like you, I'm really enjoying them not being very good, and that they find themselves in 19th position in the pit in the league table at the moment. Played 16 games, just 17 points, just 4 wins all season, 5 draws, 9 defeats. Oh, how we laughed at Rotherham. But they're not as bad as the numbers suggest in some ways. So I've done a lot of digging here. So this is not going to be massively it's going to sound stat heavy, but I'm going to go some headlines, which ultimately, what are they good at, what are they bad at, basically, is what we're going to come out at the end of this, and how can we win, and what do we need to do to stop them, in my opinion. Firstly, individuals. They've signed 1 million players. One player is having a good season amongst many who are underperforming. That player is Joe Powell. Joe Powell plays central midfield, has created 34 goal-scoring opportunities for Rotherham this season. That's a lot. Our highest performing player in that regard is Sean Rowan on 19, by the way. And we do create relatively decent number of chances. We're kind of mid-table for that, just as a team. So for one player to be almost double our highest player is quite impressive. He does take set pieces, which obviously bumps that number a little bit. It also indicates they're getting first contacts on a lot of set pieces, but also is quite creative in a team that hasn't got a huge amount of creativity in it. Not many Steve Evans teams do. In fairness, they tend to be quite robust. But yeah, he's one to look out for. He's a key player. He's always seems to be kind of a high-performing player in relatively low-performing teams. He's been at Burton Albion for a good few seasons, was by far their best player for a long time. So from an individual perspective, Joe Powell is a player to look out for. From a team perspective, though, they're almost like a team of what's the word I'm looking for here? Contradictions. Good word. So firstly, in terms of performance, they've lost 4 of their last 5 games. They did win 2-0 against Stevenage at home. Aside from that, they lost away at Crawley in their last game, which is quite funny. Lost away at Barnsley, lost away at Orient, and also lost at home to Wrexham. 3 of those 4 games were 1-0. The other was 2-0. So most games are really quite low scoring. There's only been 1 game all season in which one team has scored more than 2 goals, and that is their 3-3 draw away at Peterborough. Their 4 wins have come against Cambridge, Stevenage, Reading, and also right towards the start of the season, the anomaly there is Huddersfield at home. And their draws came against Bristol Rovers at home, Charlton away, Shrewsbury away, and Peterborough away. So they haven't really picked up any points against any teams that you'd expect to be up there, other than a win against Huddersfield Town. Everyone else is a team that is you class to be underperforming. So in terms of results, It's funny, isn't it? It's quite funny. They're quite bad.
There's some insight for you.
Yeah,
Stacey
but
West. Go on.
go on. It's funny because it's Steve Evans, isn't it? And we all like to see Steve Evans fail. But particularly this early in the season, what do the underlying numbers suggest? Well, there's some, as mentioned, there are some contradictions here because they're actually got the 10th highest expected goals in the league, despite scoring, well, not many, to be honest. There's only, I think, one team that scored fewer goals than them in the whole of League One so far this season. So goal scoring is their main issue. They're not bad at keeping teams out, to be honest. Their defensive metrics are absolutely fine and relatively solid across the board, bar one little thing. So, yeah, they've got the 10th highest XG, 9th highest shots per 90, but the 20th in shots on target in terms of the percentage of them. But also, they've got the second highest amount of headed shots and the highest amount of shots in terms of a percentage from outside the box. So, actually, they're creating chances from two ways. Number one, set pieces. And number two, pot shots, effectively. They don't have many shots at all from inside the 18-yard box with their feet. So kind of high quality chances in good positions. They're not particularly good at creating those situations. Not bad at set pieces. Haven't scored a huge number of goals, but a high percentage of those goals are from set pieces. They've scored 4 so far this season. Of course, we've scored quite a few more than that in the league. We scored 10. But in terms of a percentage of their overall goals, they're a set piece threat to an extent. But actually, they really don't create a lot anywhere else other than long range efforts. So to me, that doesn't sound too worrying. Of course, we need to defend that well, but it doesn't sound too worrying. And then from a defensive perspective, a lot of their defensive metrics are pretty good. But on a really interesting thing here, their areas of dominance is really good inside their own 18-yard box. Don't give many chances away in their own 18-yard box. But not only is it classed as contested, the opposition actually dominates zone 1 and 3. So that's kind of either side of your 18-yard box. So almost like touchline to the edge of the 18-yard box, that kind of area there between the kind of the touchline, the 18-yard box, and the goal line, that kind of area there. The opposition dominate against as an average across the whole season. So that indicates to me, and having watched all of the goals conceded back this season, they are quite susceptible in behind the fullbacks, and there's quite a lot of goals that they concede are either actually set pieces, oddly, even though they're quite defensively solid on the whole, and the ball getting to the byline and then being cut back. So, yeah, headlines is don't give many situations for them to get the ball in the box off set pieces, and when they do have them, defend them well, which on the whole we do. And yeah, don't allow too many long shots, because as much as it's low percentage chances, if you allow them lots of them, sometimes they go in. Their high XG tends to come from accumulation of shots rather than high quality shots. So I'm not too worried actually in terms of a defensive element for us here. We just need to be on our ball in terms of the physical side of the game, which I think we generally are, and you always have to be against a Steve Evans side. But in terms of us, we know we're good at set pieces in terms of attacking, and Rotherham have conceded a high percentage of their goals from set pieces despite actually making a lot of first contacts defensively. And I think getting to the byline and cutbacks is going to be a real way in. So we do tend to attack down the flanks. We don't actually tend to have a lot of our chances in terms of the overall attacking areas to be centrally. It's left and right. So I imagine us to play 3-5-2, the wide centre forwards drifting wide with the wing back and the free 8, and creating those kind of little triangles on the wide areas and getting the ball into that kind of that area of 1 and 3, and getting the ball into the box from there. So I think it suits us, even though we're normally good against teams that want to play out. I don't think Rotherham will play out very often. I think we can afford to play high up the pitch and try and catch them kind of in behind their fullbacks. I think that is the way in. So yeah, I appreciate a lot of me talking, so I'll be quiet now for a moment. But that's Rotherham for you.
The referee is Martin Woods. Martin Woods has refereed 3 Lincoln City games over the last couple of seasons, and in 2 of those, he sent off an opposition player. He sent off James Norwood, if I recall, for an elbow on Jay Ben in the Football League Trophy a couple of years ago. And he sent off a Notts County player when we beat them 2-0 in the League Cup last season. Then he was also the official when we lost 1-0 to Accrington with the final kick of the game, wasn't it, in one of Michael Scabala's first cup games. So not somebody who usually flashes a card, but if you are a betting person, make sure you get on Steve Evans to be booked anytime, because it will almost inevitably happen. It's going to be a really interesting game. It's a real shame it's not being played on a Saturday, I think, because it's a local derby. It doesn't ever feel like one, because Lincoln's in that sort of area where nobody considers us a derby, so we have to just consider other people a derby. But it really is, and the presence of Steve Evans kind of adds to that. So, well, that's brilliant.
What I will say, by the way, on Rotherham away, really looking forward to going. I like their stadium. Don't necessarily like Rotherham particularly as a place, but I do like their ground, and I like the away end. I think it's a really good away end. I like that it's quite steep. It's going to you can create some good atmosphere in there as well. So I think it'll be a good night. Personally, I'm going to predict a strong performance from us here. I think it plays to our strengths on the whole. Rotherham do pose a bigger threat than their league possession kind of suggests, but they're not good yet. I think they've got the squad to be good eventually, but they're not good yet. Hopefully we can capitalise on that.
Who starts up top?
Ben House, Jevon McCarmer. Freddie Draper will play a big role, though, I think, at some point in the game.
Funny, isn't it? Bailey Cadamarchi not even getting mentioned. He would really love to get on against her.
I don't think there's space in behind. I think if we go goal up and then we can get in behind, then the Bailey absolutely will go here. But I don't think Bailey's strengths are wide. I think his strengths are kind of centrally and getting in behind and finishing. We want players that are comfortable drifting wide and combining with the wide midfield, our kind of wide centre mid, particularly Jack Moylan, and also the wing back on either side. And I think Ben House and Jevon McCarmer of our quartet that are currently fit up front are most suited to being able to operate in those wide areas as well as centrally. So for me, that's the reason why we picked those.
Good game.
It's not just because I like those two players and want them to do well. I think tactically it makes sense for those two.
We're talking a good game for Eric Ring as well, potentially. If we're talking about getting in behind the fullback, it's going to be more of an attacking wing back. Brilliant. Well, that was episode 337 of the Stacey West podcast, where we got some FA Cup joy at Crawley. We got some tequila rosé joy in Withcall, and hopefully we might get some EFL League One joy at Rotherham United on Tuesday night. I'm going to go and watch the second episode of a series called Manifest that we've just started, which seems pretty good. Is it good?
Excellent. It's pretty good, yeah. It does go on a long time. There's a lot of episodes, but it starts really well.
Yeah, okay. So we're going to go and watch that. Chris is going to go and do whatever Chris does, have a bath in some stats or something. And we will be back. I think I will be back with Ben on Wednesday night, possibly, because I think you're recording a different podcast. So in the meantime,
with me and Charlie, if anyone's interested in listening to some stories, a more in depth, wider League One, League Two, Championship, Charlie and I will be covering what normally is the and finally section on most podcasts. We like to just kind of delve a little bit more deeply into 2 or 3 stories each week. So if you're interested in that, please listen. It'd be nice. Obviously, that's not very particularly Lincoln City related, but it's a little project we've got going on the side, and it'd be nice to have some people listen to what we talk about.
Wonderful. Brilliant. Well, all that remains to be said on the back of that is up the imps.
Up the imps.
Thank you.